Welcome to the Supervision Guidelines. Under New South Wales Fair Trading, the Supervision Guidelines were updated on the 23rd of March 2020. What that means is that licensees who run a business have a legal obligation to ensure the proper supervision of their business. Now, this was introduced to minimise the risk of the breaches that have occurred in the past. The Supervision Guidelines set out the requirements for proper supervision of the business, including the steps they must take to prevent fraud, underquoting, and misrepresentation. These requirements include supervision of employees engaged in the business, establishment of procedures designed to ensure that the provisions of the Act and regulation and other relevant laws are complied with, and monitoring employees' conduct to ensure that these procedures are being followed. Now, what you will also find that under this particular section, failure to comply with the supervision guidelines carries a penalty of up to 200 penalty points, equaling $22,000 for the corporation, or 100 penalty points, $11,000 in other cases. So, have you heard about the licensee guidelines? Well, a lot of officers are not aware that this is actually a legal requirement. So let's have a look. On the 23rd of March, these were issued, and this comes under Section 32 of the Property and Stock Agents Act 2002. Now, remembering we have had a change of our legislation, but the Act was still in force from 2002. What we do is we have 10 particular requirements that the licensee must ensure that they have completed. And in each of these, after we have a look at the introduction, it says to properly supervise persons engaged in the business, to establish procedures designed to ensure that the provisions of the Act and other laws are relevant to the conduct of the business, and to monitor the conduct of the business. Now, what happens is that this is actually issued in addition to Section 32(4) provides that the Secretary, so that's the Secretary for Fair Trading, from time to time issue and notify the licensees guidelines as to what constitutes the proper supervision of the business of a licensee. So what they've done is they've actually given us a Part B, which is definition, and then they actually give us a step-by-step guide on what you must have. So under number 1, and there are 10 in all in the supervision guideline. Under number 1, licensee in charge, it says that the licensee must ensure that no part of the business is left unsupervised by a licensee in charge. Number 2 is ensure that no more than one licensee in charge of the business is in charge of any one particular business at any one time. Ensure that any licensee in charge who is permanently or temporarily unable to properly carry out their duties due to illness, leave, or some other reason is replaced by an appropriate Class 1 holder, so that way there's always a licensee in charge at all times. Section number 4 is prepare and maintain a document as part of the operational procedures that clearly identifies each licensee in charge relating to the business, the dates of when that licensee was in charge, and the particular trust account that that particular licensee is in charge of. And number 5, ensure that details of every licensee in charge employed by the principal licensee, including the dates they commenced and finished, have been notified to the Secretary in accordance with Section 31. This also includes notifying the Secretary of the address of each place of business at which the person discharges their duties as a licensee in charge. Now, that's number 1, which actually sets the scene of what you need to do. As you move through the next sections, section number 2, it's a requirement to prepare operational procedures. Now, operational procedures are particular procedures when you are supervising your business and the conduct of your employees to ensure that they are meeting the responsibility of the business and their processes. So, for example, I've already prepared some particular documents which are part of the procedures. So in here, what we do is we have all different types of procedures that may be relevant in your real estate office. Advertising, how to fill out agency agreements, complaint handling, fraud prevention, price substantiation, residential tenancy matters, risk management, sales process, trust accounting, and of course a register of all operational procedures. Now, what happens is that your office may already have a lot of procedures, but what you must ensure as a licensee is that all operational procedures of the business are reviewed at least once each calendar year to ensure that they are sufficiently robust and comply with the law. Another thing you must actually do is you must ensure that all persons engaged in the business are familiar with and comply with the operational procedures. And that, of course, is the licensee must comply with all of the operational procedures as well. Number 3 is about trust account procedures. There are strict rules in relation to the use of trust accounts, and that is disbursements and also deposits. So a principal licensee who employs a licensee in charge must ensure that each trust account is maintained in accordance with Part 7 of the Act. What that means is that you can only have one licensee in charge who is responsible for and able to authorise the withdrawal of money from the trust account. You also need to ensure as a licensee that you prepare and maintain a document that clearly identifies each licensee in the business and which licensee is in charge for the trust account. A principal licensee must also prepare and maintain written procedures for the review of trust accounts and daily or next day banking practices with respect to the receipt of trust money. Now, these particular written procedures must ensure that each trust account only has one licensee in charge who can authorise the withdrawal of trust money, the details of those particular people, and what happens is that you are reviewing a trust account transaction at least once per calendar month. The amounts deposited into and withdrawn from the trust account have been verified using the relevant financial institution's records as a source of documents. So that is relating to this bank statement. You also have to ensure that all persons who have access to the trust account system have separate logins and passwords and that they do not share these with anyone else. Any adjustments shown in the end of month reconciliation can be explained with evidence, and there are processes for obtaining and documenting the express authorisation of a licensee in charge to withdraw trust funds in accordance with the regulation. All rental and sales money is to be paid into the appropriate trust accounts, and rental money owing to landlord under a residential tenancy agreement is paid to the landlord at the end of each calendar month unless instructed otherwise. Now, what we also find is that licensee in charge must maintain a record of all cash transactions, which includes at a minimum the cash amount received, the name of the person who received the cash, the name of the person who prepared the daily banking, the name of the person who deposited the funds into the trust, and the trust account details. Now, these are usually recorded on a trust account receipt and also a bank deposit. So you need to have procedures in place. One of the things that you will need to do is ensure that all of your procedures actually meet the requirements of this particular legislation. So, for example, here is a copy of trust account procedures. So your office should actually be looking to ensure that you have some type of written document on how these particular items will be actually actioned. Now, in this particular area, we also have number 4. This is the identification check for the purpose of fraud prevention. Now, you will find a brand new fraud prevention checklist on the Office of Fair Trading website. However, in many instances, your agency will need to train the staff on what now has to be done before you can actually sign an agency agreement. So please be aware that the principal licensee must prepare and maintain written procedures on how this would be done and meet all of the requirements listed in number 4. And there are quite a few of them. Now, number 5 is about ongoing dealings with parties to the agency agreement. In the past, the principal licensee has always had to have had procedures on what to do. But what we now find is that we also have to have procedures for ongoing communication, making sure that we only use the contact details held on file when we are dealing with the client at any particular time throughout the agency agreement. If a party to the agency agreement requests a change to their contact or bank details, then this must be confirmed via an alternative contact method to the way in which the original request originated. So what we're doing is we're minimising the risk of scammers actually intercepting emails on behalf of your client or your agency. Number 6 is about the sale of residential property, selling price and other representations. And you will have heard previously about price substantiation. The principal licensee must prepare and maintain written procedures for substantiating any estimated selling price as defined in Section 72 of the Act that has been provided to the seller or prospective buyer of a residential property. This particular information must also take into consideration any sales of comparative properties, feedback from potential purchasers, any current or relevant valuations in respect to the property, the characteristics and features of the property, the methods used to market the property, and any other available factor that may affect the estimated selling price. The licensee must retain a record of the information that demonstrates how the estimated selling price was determined to be reasonable. And then, this is a big one, a licensee must ensure that the estimated selling price is reviewed at least weekly to confirm that it remains a reasonable estimated selling price. So all of the information in this particular section number 6, you must actually have procedures and also ways of demonstrating that your agents are actually complying with each and every item listed. And there are quite a few of them. Number 7 is about complaint handling procedures. A principal licensee must prepare and maintain written complaint handling procedures. Now, this is not unlike any business these days. If you have a complaint, whether it is about a staff member or whether it's a financial complaint, you must maintain a register of how the actual complaint was received, how it was resolved, and maintain a record for at least 3 years from the date of the receipt or resolution. Number 8 is the employee supervision. As a licensee in charge, you must prepare and maintain written procedures outlining the respective roles and responsibilities of all staff in the business. This means that you would need to ensure that all persons engaged in the business have completed all continual professional development they are required to undertake according to the Secretary's requirements. So in the past, a lot of agents would go off and do their own CPD and the agency would maintain a record. It is now the responsibility of the licensee to ensure that all staff have completed the continual professional development in accordance with the Secretary's guidelines. Also too, the applicable work experience requirements. These too will become the responsibility of the licensee in charge and the length of time an individual has been engaged by the agency. Section 9 is gifts and benefits. A principal licensee must prepare and maintain a register of all gifts and benefits received by a person engaged in the business in accordance with Section 53F. 53F stipulates that you are not permitted to receive a gift or benefit that could be seen as a conflict of interest for an amount over $60, and that you must maintain a register of all gifts and benefits. Number 10, the final record keeping facility. The licensee in charge must maintain records showing evidence of regular review of operational procedures, any non-compliance with the operational procedures by persons engaged in the business, and a licensee in charge must be able to produce all documentation relevant to clauses 1 to 10 of these supervision guidelines to an authorised officer in accordance with Section 105. All records relevant to clauses 1 to 10 must be kept for 3 years. Now remember, failure to do so could actually result in fines. So please take into consideration that it is a legal requirement for you to complete and prepare everything that is listed in the Secretary Guidelines.